purity was over. I really enjoyed working with Rosie. We were very close during my adventuring days. I ended up marrying my girlfriend, Rosie. I was madly in love with Rosie. I had a good paying job, and I was an adult. It only seemed natural to get married. I was thrilled when Rosie said yes. We had no problem with same sex marriage, and neither did the rest of my party. My parents came to Tornasa for the wedding. They were very happy for us and gave us a nice wedding present. We had a wonderful wedding and a great honeymoon. We stayed in a vineyard for a few days. It was a pleasant little farm that made many delicious wines. We were drunk on our love for each other, enjoying our nights together in the little farmhouse bed. Even though I now was married, things returned to normal fairly quickly. Considering the fact that we were already living together at the Full Cub Inn, our wedding didn't change very much. The years continued to pile up behind me. I knew that wizards were supposed to be old, but as time wore on, I began to fit the mold. My mystical knowledge continued to grow with me. I continued my studies as a diviner. I studied my chosen branch of magic. I was also careful to continue to study other things as well. I studied thievery. I studied every day, learning even more about thievery. I wasn't the only one who used our spare time to improve their skills. All of my companions continued to train and practice. Although they all did well, nobody stood out as improving the most. Everyone was so well-rounded that we all learned a lot. I was 40 years old when Queen Janice had died. King Gareth seemed not to care at all. At least that was the public opinion on the matter. Terrible rumors even circulated that he had something to do with the Queen's death. Their nephew, Prince Travis, was 19 years old. Luckily for him and his mother, Princess Emily, Prince Eric was alive and healthy. Since he was the uncontested heir to the throne, Prince Travis and his family were safe. The kingdom of Daria was in a terrible mess, as everything seemed to be falling apart. It was no wonder that the orcs decided to launch a major offensive upon seeing that Daria was so weak. A white-bearded wizard, Faladin himself, came to me requesting help. "It is good to see you again, Helena," he said, treating me like an equal as he had leaned on his wizardly staff. "I need you and your companions to bring a treaty to the orc chieftain. It has many concessions in it, but it's fair and it should stop the orcs from invading." It was a sad time for the kingdom of Daria. But we really had no choice. We weren't prepared for war, and the advantages that the treaty would give the orcs was the only way to stop an invasion. I accepted the task. "Your service to the kingdom won't go unnoticed," the kindly wizard said with a smile. Blaze was happy to be moving along, and so were the other mounts the rest of my party was riding. It was a terrifying journey into the far west and orc territory. We left the kingdom of Daria behind as we traveled toward the west and into orc territory, far beyond the safety of human lands. I was nervous to be traveling in such a dangerous territory, but I was also eager to see the barbaric culture. We were deep into the wilderness when we stumbled upon something entirely different. The trees had become older and older with each step, and the forest was teeming with wildlife. We were far from the orc homeland still, but as we passed through a circle of mushrooms, we began to see strange things. Little people, similar to elves, but much smaller, danced all around us. One of them came forward and asked for aid. She wore a tiny little dress, and her diminutive shoes were pointed. She said that a monster had attacked their forest. We went to check it out. The creature was enormous, larger than any boar I'd ever heard of. It looked badly diseased, its eyes were bleeding, and its fur was all matted with filth. I would have guessed that it was undead, a zombie of some type, but my arcane skills told me that no necromancy was involved. It was corrupted and far from natural, and my best guess was that it was the result of some magical experiment. The moment it saw us, it charged. Dominic saved the day. The boar struck me solidly across the face, dropping me to the ground. Luckily, Dominic cast his healing magic upon me while Rosie struck it across the back. I got back to my feet, shaking off what could have been a mortal wound. The corrupted beast roared in pain, but the fight wasn't over yet. It charged again, this time directly at me. I healed the beast. Although I didn't know where the corruption had come from, I had a good idea about how to stop it. I used my magic to remove the taint, turning the boar back into a normal creature. The boar wandered away, no longer a threat. The fey creatures were very happy with us. The evil creature was gone, and they were safe. There had to be 1,000 of them living there, and not all of them were small. I saw nymphs, dryads, pixies, brownies, and many other of nature's creatures. The small fey fairy, whom had requested our aid, came forward with a reward. I was presented with a bundle of herbs and plants that make the could make the most beneficial cures. I graciously accepted the healer's kit, watching as Dominic eyed the bundle with curiosity. It would complement his healing magic. Well, the community of Fae gathered around me. I could feel that they were very curious about me. I knew that something special was occurring. I had the opportunity to become a druid. I declined the offer. I was happy to have helped, but I had my own destiny in mind. I turned down the offer to become a druid and continued onward toward the Orc nation. Even though I didn't become a druid, I still learned a lot from the Fae creatures. We arrived at the great Orc city. It wasn't really a city, but more of a collection of Orc tribes. They had pelt houses and wooden enclosures that stretched across the wilderness. They were a rough species, but they allowed us to pass with only a few bad words and dirty looks. We were stopped at an inn to rest before presenting ourselves to the Orc chieftain. "You must be the great wizard I heard about," the Orc chieftain said to me when we arrived. I gave him the peace treaty that Frolladin had given us. "You will stay with us and bring back my reply." The enormous Orc warrior waved to his attendants, who led us to a tent for us to stay in. A few weeks later, I was called back into the Orc chieftain's tent. He seemed very unsure of himself, obviously enjoying the concessions made in the treaty, but also not wanting to continue with the invasion. I smoothed over any last uncertainties, paving the way for peace. The treaty was already pretty sweet for the Orcs, so it wasn't too difficult for me to show them just how good it was. The chieftain signed the papers happily before sending me on my way. Frolladin seemed tired and sad when we returned. He leaned heavily upon his old staff, and his eyes had bags under them. He was happy that the treaty had been accepted, but he knew that the concessions would weaken Darya even more. He gave us our reward for a job well done. I was reading an old dusty tome when I had a surprise visitor at the Folcub Inn. "Good morning, Helena. I'm glad to see that you continued to work on your magic." It was Master Durgan, the doorkeeper of the academy. I hadn't seen him in a long time, but he hardly seemed to have changed at all. He greeted me warmly, as though the many years since my graduation didn't exist. "I'm afraid this isn't a social call," he said, bowing his bald head. "We need your help." We looked over our equipment and trained in our skills before we left. I trained Rosie myself. We trained many hours. I was able to teach Rosie a few things, and train Dominic myself. We trained for many hours. I was able to teach Dominic a few things. Find the ancient holy symbol. The ancient holy symbol was something I couldn't make. Well, the ancient holy symbol wasn't something I could make. Instead, I had to study history books and old maps to learn where I could obtain one. With a little luck, I found one buried in the ground near an old battle site. Dominic, our cleric, accepted it with great pride, putting it around his neck and never taking it off again. Dominic already had the healer kit. There was no sense in having two, so we sold the extra one. Give the Cloak of Shadows to Rosie. Rosie put on the Cloak of Shadows and vanished from sight. I knew that it wasn't genuine invisibility, but with her own